What's going on, Port fans? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be discussing what Jack Lukosius can bring to Port Adelaide in 2025 and beyond. Obviously part of the big Dan Houston trade, and if you haven't seen that video that was put out yesterday in what was a complete trade between three clubs, which also involved Joe Richards and Rory Atkins coming to Port Adelaide as well. And I will touch on what they can bring to Port Adelaide in other videos that will come throughout the rest of the week. But I wanted to talk about Jack Lukosius. He is the big signing of the three players that are coming to Port Adelaide, and the bloke that has signed a 6-year deal, best mates with Connor Rosie, who was a big influence, I think, in coming to Port Adelaide, will be a big part, I reckon, of what can be an interesting year for Port Adelaide come next year. So let's get straight into it, and let's talk about Jack Lukosius coming to Port Adelaide. So if you weren't aware of Jack Lukosius in what he is a part in the AFL system, some background details for you. He was picked in the 2018 draft. He was drafted as a forward. He was 116 games he's played so far, 79 goals that he has kicked for the Gold Coast Suns, and he now comes to Port Adelaide to join the club in 2025. 24-year-old, 195 centimetre. He is an athletic individual, touted as one of the best players in that 2018 draft. And whilst you sit here and say he hasn't done a complete amount of stuff that he probably could have put out in terms of his performance at the Gold Coast Suns, he had a great year in 2023 where he kicked 39 goals, was second to Ben King in the goal kicking at the Gold Coast. He has had a pretty durable time at the Gold Coast Suns. Not too many injuries have affected him, and he's been a major part of their rebuilding for stages, and obviously hasn't tasted final success or anything of the sort at the Gold Coast Suns. So now travels down back home to South Australia. He's obviously a South Australian boy. Grew up with Connor Rosie, best mates with Connor Rosie, and that was the big drawing board, I think, for him coming to Port. Talk about a versatile player. He has been able to throw himself down back, and obviously been used by Damien Hardwick and Stuart Dew, who were coaches both for Jack Lukosius at the time, and has been thrown down back, but predominantly a forward. He's a tall boy, he's athletic, he can run right up the ground. He has a great running capacity. That's been one of his strengths, and that was one of his major strengths as a drafting, as a drafting detail. One of the key parts that selectors were definitely looking for, especially for the Gold Coast Suns when they selected him. The key part for me is his kicking. His kicking ability is elite. It's rated elite. It was in the draft. It has been throughout the whole time, and we've seen multiple kicks throughout his time. When he has the footy, he is a very, very good operator when it comes to using his foot. Can use both sides of his feet as well, which is a talented thing to do, especially as a big man. So 195 centimeters, same height as me actually. That's quite interesting. Definitely not as durable, that's for sure. But he is a compatible player that definitely can be reliable, given the opportunity, I think, and that's the most important thing. He has an opportunity now at Port Adelaide in a different system, in a different environment back at home to thrive under a Ken Hinkley-led charge. Obviously, 2025 seems to be the pending last year of Ken Hinkley under his contract, and we'll see obviously what can pan out for the club next year. But for Jack in particular, he's definitely going to be a player that we'll see inside 50 come next year, round one, I think. And I think he has the ability to be a Westhoff type operator. You know, he was deep forward as a kid, travelled through, be able to build his capacity up, was able to play up the ground, swing down back, play on the wing, and he was a very, very versatile player. And I think that's exactly what we need. You know, coming in, you've got Georgiades can be the mainstay forward. You've got Ollie Lord, who'll develop nicely as the big key forward as well. You can have Lukosius roaming about right up the ground, utilising his elite foot skills and really reading the play really well. And using his running capacity, and with the question marks over Todd Marshall and his concussions and his future about the longevity of him, I think having Lukosius come right in probably goes right above, as a second forward instantly. You definitely have Georgiades and then Lukosius, and then to filter out between Marshall and Lord as to who comes in as a third forward. So it's the reason Port Adelaide brought him in, was to be stocking up our forward stocks and making sure we have a strong forward line come next year. It's going to be a completely different look without Charlie Dixon, and obviously with Dixon retiring, you definitely wanted to have a bring-in tall forward, and knowing that Ollie Lord has the potential to be the big Charlie replacement, you can have Jack Lukosius in there as the versatile swingman. And look, it definitely question marks the future of Jeremy Finlayson and Asava Radaglia as a forward. Whether or not Finlayson can find his way back in the side will be an interesting question mark. And then obviously Asava will probably have to end up down back, because let's be honest, that forward experiment worked for one game and the rest was a bit questionable. So yeah, there's a lot to play out in terms of where exactly the structure of the forward line will occur. But I think Lukosius brings a sense of flexibility. He's got so much potential. He's only 24 years of age. His prime is yet to come, essentially. This day and age, players are hitting their prime in 25, 26, 27, 28-year-olds. So his prime is yet to come. Feeling at home, and whilst he, was a reliable source at the Gold Coast Suns, he'll have that connection back home, the comfort of being home, being at Port Adelaide. He was a Port Adelaide fan. Been touted as, I've heard rumours about Crows being, obviously he was interested in the Crows as well, but I heard he was a Crows fan. But there's pictures of him in Port gear, so knew from an early stage that he was going to be around the mark playing for Port Adelaide. So a very impressive kid, and I'm looking forward to the amount of upside he'll bring to the club come 2025 and beyond. He's here now probably for the rest of his career, and what we can get out of him will be interesting. I hope it doesn't end up like a bit of a Jack Watts type of operation. That would be really, really shit. I'm not going to lie to you. So I have full faith that Lukosius is obviously the number one trade-in target that we got. Richards and Atkins obviously follow, and then pick 13, which is still, that trade is baffling to me still. But to isolate this in terms of purely focusing on Jack Lukosius, I think it's a massive tick for me in terms of what he'll bring to the club and what he'll bring on field. And I think having Connor Rosie there as that best mate who can support you, and as skipper, it'll help quite a bit in terms of fitting right in at the club, and I have no doubt he'll definitely find his way. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we are, I know everyone will be still talking about the Houston trade and talking about how, I've heard people say it's the worst deal ever, it's a bad deal. Kane Corn said it was a bad deal. I thought it was a bad deal in a sense, but other ways it looks good. Sources have told me it was the best deal on offer and best deal available the club could get. So I have to accept it now. I have to move on. It's being done. I want to bring positivity to the players we have brought in, because I think they all play an equal value into what they can bring in some capacity. And Lukosius is the number one of them all. So I'm very, very excited to see what Jack can bring in 2025. Would love to know in the comments below what you guys think Jack Lukosius can bring and what he'll do for the club in 2025 and beyond. Thank you so much for watching, Port fans and other AFL fans as well. I'm sure the trade period wrapping up is definitely the more exciting thing, but since Port Adelaide are basically done with the trade period, now we focus on what these players can bring and what the draft will bring in 2025. So I'm very much keen to discuss all of that going into the last few months of the year. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new for plenty more Port Adelaide and AFL content and news to come your way. Check out the Glass Table, latest episode, and new trade episode will come out tomorrow as well. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Anthony, and as always, come ThePear.